we don't believe that masculinity in itself is inherently toxic. No way. We think it's actually the absence of masculinity. That's what the problem is. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Mike Nicholson, and I'm the director of a company called Progressive Masculinity. I was an English teacher for 18 years in state-maintained secondary schools. During that time, I did a lot of counselling and mentoring for particularly boys who were going through different social and emotional issues. They would come to speak to me at break time, dinner time, after school. And what became obvious through this process of talking to these boys and young men is that a lot of them were living a performance of what they think it means to be a man. And that's where a lot of their issues were coming from. They were quite happy to sabotage their mental health, their relationships, their academics in order to look like what they felt a real man should look like. And about 5 years ago, I went to the head teacher at the time and I said, nobody's talking to these lads about the things we should be talking about, especially in a positive way and looking at how great masculinity can be and giving them something to aspire to. If I put something together, will you support me on it? And the head teacher was great. He said, yeah, go for it. So over the next 3 years, I developed the Progressive Masculinity program. And it got to a point where it's having such a strong impact in the school that I then left and set up Progressive Masculinity as a business. We've now got facilitators all over the country who travel to schools, and it's very simple what we do. We provide a very safe, non-judgemental space to explore what young men and boys think it means to be a man. And we try and flip that social narrative where everything is masculinity is toxic, masculinity, it's almost something to be ashamed of. And we try and show them that actually there are lots of amazing men out there in the world doing amazing things, and we should be proud of our masculinity. Yes, there are some things that we need to be aware of, some pitfalls, some issues. We don't do as well at school. We dominate prison statistics. We dominate exclusion statistics. We dominate homeless statistics, suicide statistics. We have to talk about this stuff, but can we frame it in a way that is aspirational rather than constantly negative? That top right picture, by the way, I also took 1 year sabbatical from teaching to lead an educational project out in Ethiopia. Last year was a real kind of take-off year for us. You can see that our work was featured in the Times, the Daily Telegraph, Radio 4, and we are part of a Channel 4 documentary on masculinity that I think is coming out in November. So this is one of our philosophies, progressive masculinity. We hear a lot about toxic masculinity and it's everywhere. We don't deny that it exists, but we don't believe that masculinity in itself is inherently toxic. No way. We think it's actually the absence of masculinity. That's what the problem is. Weak men are abusive and spiteful and cruel and have that regressive dominance-based approach. We actually think that strong men are caring and compassionate and loyal and cooperative. Unfortunately, especially in the minds of a lot of young men, and I know that I was guilty of this when I was younger, we reverse that. We see the aggressive man as the strong man, and the man who is cooperative is somehow weaker or feminine. And that's a kind of flip that we try to enact throughout our workshops. We're also trying to put an end to what I refer to as oppositional binary thinking. Just because we're supporting boys doesn't mean that we're abandoning girls. Actually, women will benefit a lot from this program because of the progress that we make with boys. But it almost seems that we live in a society where you have to love something and hate something else. Any work you do on supporting boys will support girls, and we care greatly about both social groups. But we have had some criticism from people who don't know about our work that, well, what do you do for the girls? Do you not care about girls? It seems like we live in a world where you have to love or hate everything. Okay, obviously we try and support everyone in this program. Okay, so progressive masculinity, we give every school 8 options for workshops, and they choose the 6 that they believe are most appropriate to their young men and their context. And then we deliver those 3 hours on day 1, 3 hours on day 2. And you can see that the workshops cover a very broad range of some of the issues within masculinity. Now, at the very first workshop at the start, it's the most important thing we do. We establish almost a baseline understanding of masculinity. So at the very start of the workshop program, I will say, right, here's what we're going to do, boys. I want you to tell me what the unwritten rules of being a man are. You don't know where you got them from. You've never seen them written down before. Don't worry about being politically correct. Don't worry about what you think I want to hear. Just be honest, just be truthful. And after who knows how many sessions, hundreds and hundreds, these are the most popular responses. That we've always got to look strong and never appear weak. We've got to project images of strength constantly, even when we're actually struggling. That we've got to be athletic and sporty. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I've played sport all my life. And the mental and physical effects or benefits of sport are huge, but if you attach your value as a man and as a human being to you going to the gym, I think that's where we start to get issues. You know, if the gym is your thing, fantastic. But if it's not, you are no less of a man. Your masculinity isn't dependent on something like that. Have loads of money. Don't look like you're trying too hard. Yeah, as an English teacher, I've seen lots of young men who actually, I could tell they were really into a poem or really into Macbeth, and they would quite happily sabotage that to look a certain way. They wouldn't want to look like a nerd or a geek. Never back down. So that defiance, and it's important that we stand up for our beliefs, but that defiance that borders on petulance, that's not being a strong man. Sometimes we're going to make mistakes, and explaining and apologizing can actually be very masculine things to do. Attract girls, yeah, loads of them. Unfortunately, that one's still around. An entire harem if possible. Look like nothing bothers you, especially when it does. Just man up. Have the latest brands. So there's a very strong sense of materialism. If you've ever been in the school on a non-uniform day, you've seen that. And the last one, stick by your mates, which I actually really like this one. The sense of brotherhood that comes. It can be quite lonely being a man sometimes, but this loyalty is absolutely fantastic. But where I would challenge this one is, what if your mate is being racist or homophobic or sexist? What does loyalty look like in that situation? Does it look like you also doing those things? Or is actually you getting your mate and saying, actually, no, you're better than that. Come on, you've crossed a line there, mate. Do we challenge our friends enough? Now, I'm sure you're aware of some of the big hitters in this field: Gary Wilson, Mark Roberts, Matt Pinkett, Adam Hampton. This quote is particularly poignant, I think, at this stage in the presentation. It comes from Gary Wilson, and he says that most boys don't have a life. What they have is an act. When a man is deeply confused, desperately worried, utterly alone, he will often pretend the opposite. Early in life, little boys are taught to pretend, and most of us will do this for the rest of our lives. And that's really what we're about in progressive masculinity, ending the need for this performance. Let's establish who we want to be, kind of man, partner, father we want to be in the future, what our values are, and let's take steps to becoming that man. Now, I think probably the most visually striking exercise that we do is called the masculine living, and it's to highlight this performance aspect of masculinity. So each of the young men gets a blank paper mache mask. On the outside of the mask, we ask them to write down, what do they project? What version of themselves they want the world to see? When I look at you, what do you want me to see? Even if it's not true. On the inside, it's where they've got to be really brave. That's where it's the opposite. What would you hide from us? What would you not want us to see because you think it makes you less of a man, weak, vulnerable? So I'm sharing two masks with consent from both the parent and the pupil. I've got one from year 7, an 11-year-old, and one from year 10, so a 15-year-old. The year 7, on the outside of his mask, says that he wants to look like he's not bothered by anything. He's confident, he's happy, and he's got nothing on his mind. The year 10, he wants to look sporty, strong, popular, alpha, funny, like a clown, and like nothing bothers him. On the inside of the masks, the year 7, no confidence, I'm dumb, ADHD, always annoyed, always angry, always upset. Even by the age of 11 years old, he's learned that he has to hide that stuff in order to project what it means to be a real man. The inside of the year 10, height and weight, so some body issues there. Family issues, always arguing. Don't know what I'm going to do in the future. Sad but hide it, and always angry. Now, when we reflect on those masks, it really embeds this idea that we are living a performance. And I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. I wouldn't even try to unpick a complex psychological issue because I'm not qualified. But you don't have to be to know that pretending you're something you're not, it's sabotaging, isn't it? It's not going to be helping you. So, how can we find the strength to be the men that we want to be? I'm just going to give you a little example of how we very positively phrase it before I wrap this up. I'm going to take an example from this workshop, which we focus on masculine hierarchy, friendship, and banter, just to show you how we kind of approach these issues. So there's loads of post-it notes around the room, and I say to the lads, right, male friendship groups, find yourself some post-its, come and stick them on the board. What are the positives about being in an all-male friendship group, and what are some of the maybe potential negatives? And after about 5 minutes, the board is full of post-its. These are the kind of things that we tend to see. That some of the potential negatives are you can lose your individuality, lose your values, lose who you are, get dragged into things that you didn't want to do, that you would never have done on your own. It's very hard to be an upstander, especially when you're young. It takes a lot of strength, when you're in a group, to be that guy that stands up and says this is wrong. Things like this, homophobia, misogyny, and racism can be normalized, can become banter and not seen for what they are. And not all friendship groups are supportive. Some of them can be a bit cutthroat and dog eat dog. However, I think a lot of people view that as that's what male friendship groups are, dismissing young men as thugs and, mindless bush shelter smashers. And that's not even half the picture, because the positives are it gives them a very strong sense of belonging. In a world where they struggle to fit in, or they think they struggle to fit in, it gives them a place to belong, gives them that very strong sense of connection and brotherhood, strong sense of humor and interest. I tell the groups that if you ask me when have I been my most happiest in my life, if I take away my wife and children out of that kind of equation, it's with my friends. Having a laugh in the changing room after a game, or going out and having some fun. I've never laughed or been as happy as I have with my male friends. We get each other because we're going through the same stuff. We know someone's got our back, and we escape from the pressures of life. And then they can't be what they can't see. It's an old phrase, isn't it? But they can't. So we show them what does really strong male friendship look like. And out of all the stories out there, I focus on Kevin Sinfield and Rob Burrow. And most of them have never heard of these guys. Rugby league has its pockets of popularity, but as a national game, it's not that big really. So I tell them, Kevin Sinfield, one of the most gifted rugby league players we've ever produced, playing for Leeds Rhinos. And then we've got his friend Rob, also playing for Leeds Rhinos, nowhere near as gifted as Kevin, 5'5" and 10.5 stone. Now that is tiny for a fully grown man. He shouldn't really have made a rugby player, Rob, but he was the most resilient, toughest little thing out there. Every time he got knocked down, he bounced back up, and so he made it to that top level. This is a little clip of Rob scoring one of the best tries in grand final history in 2011.
That's for the patience of players like Johnny Lomax and Lee Gasco, really. Obviously, for the other team, Kevin Sinfield's been there, seen it and done it all before. They're aware of this grinding, relentless game that could take a 79th minute before we get a winner.
Oh, he's got under the Burrow! And he's outstripped Wellens! It's a brilliant Burrow try! A fantastic Rob Burrow try!
So these two become really strong friends, playing for the same team, training together every single day. Their families become really, really close, but this is where tragedy strikes. Rob is diagnosed with motor neuron disease. He's restricted to a wheelchair, his muscles gradually waste away, and he's now got to the point where he requires assistance to even talk. He has to use a voice box. As sometimes happens in these situations, his ex-teammates and his friends start to drop off in their visits over time, but never Kevin. Kevin is now retired, and he spends most of his time with Rob, running ultra marathons, triathlons, marathons in order to raise money and awareness for motor neuron disease. He paid for a buggy to be designed for Rob, so he can push Rob and spend this time with him on these marathons. And this next little clip I'm going to show is the end of the Leeds Marathon, where after pushing him for 26 miles, he stops 10 yards before the finish line, picks his mate up and carries him over the finish line. So then we've got Kevin with his best mate, Rob, even giving him a little kiss as he picks him up and carries him over the finish line. And then you can hear a pin drop at this point in the session. No matter where I am, whether it's a private school in Cheshire, whether it's inner city Birmingham, it doesn't matter. They're really strongly affected by this, the young man. And we just talk about how does that friendship represent the best of what we're capable of? What's great about that? And then we bring it back to our own lives. What kind of friends are we? Are we in a healthy friendship group? Are we bringing out the best in each other? And just giving them something to aspire to and showing them the positivity of what's out there is what we're all about. And I'd just like to finish by leaving it on this. This is our why at Progressive Masculinity. This is what drives us. So we often work with young men that are deemed challenging. Okay. You only get to choose 12 young men for this workshop. So you can imagine the 12 that are picked tend to have some issues. What's driven us and our success as a company has been the pupil feedback. We don't have a huge marketing budget compared to some other companies. The huge expansion has come off the back of what these young men have said. We often get assistant head teachers or deputy head teachers saying, I can't believe he wrote that. I can't believe that lad wrote that. And if you look at some of the comments, that top right one, I love it, but it also haunts me. I just felt like I mattered while I was doing this. I love it because he clearly enjoyed the session, but what does that mean that he feels like the rest of the time? This idea of being frustrated and marginalized and unseen and unheard. This is what we're out to do. I see you, I hear you, I'm not going to judge you. Let's talk about everything, get it out there, and let's figure out a way to move forward, to be proud of being a man and to be the kind of men that, are going to change this world for the better. So I think that's where I'll leave it off. But if you have any questions, I'm sure you've got my contact details. Thank you for the opportunity.